Hey everyone, Miko here with Behavior Analyst Supervisor. We wanted to bring you this free video on stimulus equivalence. We know that stimulus equivalence is an extremely difficult topic to approach. However, it's a topic that we want to make a little bit easier for you. So throughout the next 30-45 minutes or so, we're going to be going through each of the different portions of stimulus equivalence, starting with reflexivity, moving on to symmetry, transitivity, stimulus equivalence, mutual entailment, and combinatorial entailment. Now, you might not know what any of those terms are, but that's okay. We are going to tell you. We are also going to post a part 2 of this here on YouTube in a few days. Part 2 is going to go over about 5 to 6 practice mock exam questions that relate to stimulus equivalence. So you're going to practice solving some of these questions. The other thing that I want to tell you is this is a preview to our Tuesday, Thursday calls. Our Tuesday, Thursday study group calls are only available to those who have signed up for the All You Need Guaranteed package. If you're interested in this, feel free to send us an email. You can DM us on Instagram. Our email is info@behavioranalystsupervisor.com. I do host those Tuesday, Thursdays. We spend about an hour going through different concepts or answering questions. Ultimately, we just want to make sure that you have enough support to pass your test and to feel good doing it. So without further ado, let's jump into some stimulus equivalence. Hey y'all, Miko here with Behavior Analyst Supervisor. Another installment of our Tuesday, Thursday task list review. This is Tuesday, so we're going to be reviewing a mini lesson. Today's mini lesson is on stimulus equivalence. This will be a 2-part mini lesson. Part 1, which is today, will be learning. Part 2, which is practice, will be next Tuesday. So next Tuesday, we'll be going through questions relating to what you learned today. I will upload the recording tomorrow, so you have some time to review it. I do have examples today, but I want to give you some time to digest. This is one of those things, I think I've said this before, you know, I love the Cooper book. I keep it open next to me 24/7. I always have it. When I write questions, I always refer to it. But I don't think that everyone needs to read the Cooper book cover to cover to pass the test. I think it's good practice. I think you should get in the habit of it because you will be using it in your practice. But I don't think that you necessarily need to read it cover to cover to pass. Now, there are certain things such as stimulus equivalence that I think you should go to the Cooper book and you should learn a little bit more about. So after today, I'm going to be giving you all a little bit of homework. That homework is to go study up on this. I want our average as a group next Tuesday to be 80%. Everyone's going to master stimulus equivalence, hopefully, with the information I provide today. We will go through at least 10 questions next Tuesday, so that's what the class will be filled with. Today, again, it's simply going through the different components of stimulus equivalence, learning what each one is, and going from there. There is a Breakdown the Beast this weekend. It'll be Kevin and Amy, so please jump on, check them out. There will be another one not too long after August 5th. That will be myself and Bree, so feel free to join us for both. The links are in your accounts. I have the links for all of the Breakdown the Beast for the rest of the year uploaded into your accounts. Other than that, we'll have time for questions towards the tail end of this. But for now, let's put our thinking hats on because this is a confusing topic. Stimulus equivalence is not all that fun, to be honest with you. It's something that I struggled with, and honestly, it's something that I chose not to study when I was prepping for the test. Now, I would not say do that. It's probably not my best choice that I've ever done, but I did it, and I sit before you today, a BCBA. But I want to make it as easy as I can, so that's what we're going to do today. Sweet. First and foremost, take a step back, relax, take a breath. Remember, it's not all that difficult if you really take some time to think about it. The other thing that I like to put into context is stimulus equivalence is a small portion of the task list. Yes, it falls under B. Yes, we can make an argument that it's in G, which are the 2 biggest sections. But the likelihood of you getting more than 3 stimulus equivalence questions out of the 185 that you do is very, very slim to none. I say that to tell you, like, we stress out about this, and you're not going to see very many questions on it. Now, you probably will see at least 1. Likely, you'll probably see 2 or 3, and you should be prepared to see them. So, no, you will see them. Don't freak out. Take a breath, and we'll figure it out together. Well, on your test, you'll be there by yourself, but hopefully you hear my voice. You get the point. Now, I put this little thing, RST is as easy as ABC. The reason I put that in there is because I struggled remembering the order. Like I'm telling y'all, I hated this. I couldn't even remember what order they went in. But then I realized, oh, RST is alphabetical. It's just like ABC. So it's reflexivity is A to A. Symmetry is A to B taught, the reverse derived. And then transitivity is the A to C relation. So RST is easy as ABC. Hopefully that helps you remember what you're looking for there. Okay. Before we get in, I have this whole slide, but there's really only one thing I want you to truly remember, and it's that we're looking for derived relations. They have to be untaught, untrained, and in the Cooper book, it actually says unreinforced as well. And so if there's previous reinforcement or if there's previous training, we do not have a derived relation. And you need to remember that from the jump, from the get-go, from the onset. Sorry, I still have some sort of cold, y'all. It's been like 2 weeks. I don't know what's going on, but you need to remember that unless it is untrained or untaught, which will be signified by dotted lines when we start learning, it is not stimulus equivalence. And I'll show you what that looks like. I have scenarios that we're going to break down. We're not solving them. I'm going to go through them together. Next Tuesday, we'll solve them. So that's the number one most important thing, I think. Next is, or I guess first is reflexivity. Now I have the definitions here. So the way this is going to flow is I have the definition of reflexivity. I'll explain a little bit about it, and then we'll jump into an example that demonstrates reflexivity. And I also have the triangle drawn. So I'm trying to make this literally as simple as I can make it for you. So what reflexivity is this is the textbook definition. So this is word for word. It's a direct quote from the Cooper book. So I promise you, I copied it directly out of the Cooper book, so you can trust this. Reflexivity is a type of stimulus to stimulus relation in which the learner, without any prior training or reinforcement for doing so, it says that for all of them. So that's why I'm telling you, it needs to be without training or reinforcement. That's called derived. That's what derived means. Selects a comparison stimulus that is the same as the sample stimulus. So this is A equals A. All reflexivity is identity matching, right? So look in the mirror, you say, oh, that's Miko in the mirror. That's reflexivity, right? It's identity matching. You grab these pair of AirPods, see them tomorrow, wow, it's the same pair of AirPods. That's identity matching, it's reflexivity. If I teach you, if I say, hey, these are the same as the AirPods you can buy at Target, that is not reflexivity. I taught you. We don't have identity matching. We don't have a derived or an untrained relation. We have a taught relation. Taught relations are not stimulus equivalents. Important to remember that. So there's that. Our example. So like I said, we have some applied examples here. I have a scenario and then I have it drawn out on the triangle. So we'll read the scenario and then we'll go through it. Well, while out on my morning walk, I saw a deer, a fox, and a unicorn. Knowing that unicorns do not exist, I quickly turned around and saw that same unicorn. What in the world did I eat for breakfast? I thought to myself. In the world of behaviorism, I have achieved, obviously this is reflexivity because that's what we're on currently, but the first thing here is this is a little bit of a tricky example because what a lot of people tend to do is you tend to jump into labeling or lettering things before you get through the whole scenario. So what people, or what I would have done previously is I would have said, okay, deer is A, fox is B, unicorn is C. That's not true. We're not teaching you that these are all animals. We're not categorizing them as animals. If we did that, sure, they would be ABC. But realistically, when you see something like this, 3 different stimuli, these represent 3 different triangles more than likely, unless it's in the same category. Here, they're not. We only go back to the unicorn. So I only need 1 triangle, and that unicorn would be A. I saw the same unicorn. That's identity matching, A to A. It's signified by a dotted line. If I were you, I would really practice drawing out this triangle. The triangle is going to help you with 90% of the problems you encounter, especially when you remember that some scenarios, you're going to have 3 different triangles. So deer, I would have 1, fox, 2, unicorn, a 3rd triangle. So that's that. Any questions about reflexivity? I am going to answer questions as we go because I don't want to get too deep and then, backtrack. So questions on reflexivity. Great. Identity matching, pretty straightforward.
Next, we have symmetry. Not so straightforward. I'm going to teach you something probably you've been taught wrong right now. But again, I'm using the textbook definition. Symmetry, a stimulus to stimulus relation in which the learner, without any prior training or reinforcement, demonstrates the reversibility. That's a key word. The reversibility of a matched sample and a comparison sample. Matched sample, comparison are important too. Matched sample tells us we were trained. Comparison tells us it's a second stimulus. What the Cooper book says is it's if A equals B and this A equals B is trained, because we can't have it unless it's trained, then we have reversibility, which is B equals A. A lot of you have probably been taught that symmetry is just A equals B. That's not entirely true. That's partially true, but it's not entirely true. As you can see here, the Cooper book, the definition tells us there has to be reversibility. If I just have A to B, there's no reversibility. That does not, I repeat, it does not meet the definition of symmetry. Symmetry is one direction taught, the reverse direction derived. I don't want to jump ahead, but this also meets the definition of mutual entailment. If you've never heard of that before, don't freak out. I'm going to teach you that in just a second. All symmetry is also mutual entailment. If you remember that, it'll be a little bit easier to remember that reversibility. So once again, a type of stimulus-stimulus relation where you have, without training, demonstration of reversibility, meaning one direction taught, the reverse derived. What that looks like in a scenario is this. Jess is a behavior therapist that works with Juan. She grabbed a fork, a spoon, and a plate from the drawer. Jess taught Juan that he could use a fork to eat gnocchi. You say gnocchi or gnocchi? I say gnocchi, but when I don't know. Anyways, off topic. To eat gnocchi. She walked in from the lunchroom and Juan said, "Look, Jess, you can even eat gnocchi with a spoon." So in this scenario, we have a fork and a spoon, clearly, and we have a plate, maybe a plate of C, but realistically, this doesn't even have anything to do with the plate. So our question dissection skills are allowing us to eliminate plate. We're not worried about it. There's no relation, trained or untrained, between the plate. So I would scribble it out, forget about it, so you're not getting confused. I would label fork as A, spoon as B. The reason I'm categorizing them as the same is because we're using both of these things to eat with. So we're using both of these things to eat with, right? We're eating gnocchi with the fork, we're eating gnocchi with the spoon, therefore they're both utensils. It fits within that same category. So that's kind of where we're at there. Here, we were taught that you can use a fork to eat gnocchi. So that's kind of that A to B. A fork is a utensil. And then you say, oh, cool, a spoon is also a utensil. So these are the same. They're the same, right? So we have that reversibility. One direction taught, the reverse direction derived. A fork, use it for gnocchi. A spoon, we learned that it's just like a fork and you can use it to eat gnocchi. Reversibility. Again, this also meets mutual entailment, but I'm jumping ahead about 3 slides, so we'll get there in a second. Stop, pause, questions on symmetry. How many of you, just to get some feedback in the chat, and I'm just going to change it to only me so we're not throwing anyone under the bus. How many of you were taught that it was just A to B and you didn't need reversibility? I'm just curious. So if that is you, just put me in the chat. Cool. So it looks like a good bit of us. So this is an important thing to remember, right? Is well, if we go back to like our basic principles, have a little bit of that. What is it? Healthy skepticism or whatever. Scientific doubt, right? Go to the Cooper book, check out, see if what you're learning and who you're learning from is accurate. Here you need reversibility. So that's symmetry. I'm going to go ahead and move on. We're getting into the harder things now. So from here on, the next 4 things that we cover are pretty difficult. So please don't hesitate to ask questions. I guarantee you, if you have a question, someone else either watching this recording or in this Zoom room is wondering the same thing. So please don't hesitate to ask. And you don't even have to ask out loud. You can just put the question in the chat if you don't want to do that. It's challenge by choice here. So transitivity. the definition, and this is where we need to pay attention because, again, I find that a lot of people are taught stimulus equivalence and transitivity are the same thing. They're not. They are not the same thing. Not even close, to be specific. So what the Cooper book says transitivity is it describes a derived stimulus-stimulus relation that emerges as a product of training two other stimulus-stimulus relations. You'll see this keyword here, training, right? It's a product of training two other stimulus-stimulus relations. So likely in your scenario, it's going to be longer because you have to have that training of two other stimuli. So it's going to be a little bit longer. We're only worried about A to C though. We don't need A to B derived. We need A to B taught, or we need B to C taught, or we need A or B to A taught, or we need C to B taught, or something along those lines. You need two stimulus relations taught, and then you're making a derived relation, untaught, untrained, emergent relation. You'll hear it as every now and then. We need that to occur as well. So that's where we're at for this. There's a question in the chat, and then I'll go into the example. So let me read this real quick. The question is, if these things are untaught, would the data collection be the first trial? So this is more of like a practical question, probably not necessarily something you need to worry about for the test. There's not a whole lot of actual like practicality to this outside of peak programming. Peak programming is primarily the type of assessment procedure that uses stimulus relations. And what they do is we do teaching trials and you do test trials. So you might teach A to B, teach A to B, teach A to B, and then you'll do a test trial to see if the learner derives B back to A. So that's kind of what occurs here. Someone is asking, do we need two derived relations or one? What does this say? Transitivity, what does this definition say? It says, describes the derived stimulus-stimulus relations A to C. That's it. We only need one, right? We only need A to C. We don't need any other derived stimulus relations. Remember, always go back to what the textbook says. It says we need two other trained relations, but we only need one derived relation. We only need A to C derived in order for stimulus equivalence to be met. So great question. That's something I get a lot. All right, our applied example. Russ was taught that cranberry juice is less sweet than grapefruit juice, and that grapefruit juice is more sweet than cranberry juice. So what I would do here, I would use my whiteboard, right? I'm going to draw on this, and I know my drawing is terrible, but I'm going to do it anyways. Russ was taught that cranberry juice, I would write an A here for cranberry juice, is less sweet than grapefruit juice. I would write a B here for grapefruit juice. Obviously, you can't do this on the screen on the test, but I would be using my whiteboard. And that grapefruit juice is more sweet than cranberry juice. So I still have A. I'm just going to write it here so I don't confuse myself, because sometimes, like if I'm going through things, I would get confused. Next, during his next nutrition course, he learned that grapefruit juice, which is B, and again, this is learned, so this is taught. We don't have anything yet. Grapefruit juice was less sweet than orange juice. Now we have a new stimulus. We need to go in with the C here. We have a brand new stimulus, which is orange juice. He thought, if that's the case, then orange juice is certainly sweeter than cranberry juice. So already down here, I see thought, which tells me it's derived. So this is great. And then if I was like sorting through this on my whiteboard, I already see that I have a C to A relationship here. So my mind is already going to transitivity since I can see clearly there's a C to A relationship here, and it was untrained. But let's not just do that. Let's go ahead and work through it. So if we go back through the scenario and we draw our lines, we have A, cranberry juice is less sweet than grapefruit juice. So that's A to B. And then we know grapefruit juice is more sweet, so that's B back to A, than cranberry juice. So both of those are taught. We do not have symmetry here, clearly, right? We don't have a derived relation on this side of things, so it cannot be symmetry. So not symmetry. During his next nutrition class, he learned that grapefruit juice, and again, this says learned that grapefruit juice is less sweet than orange juice. So we have this taught, right? So again, we have nothing here. It's just a taught relation. But now I know we have two taught relations, which is a foundational core requirement of transitivity. So again, These things are telling your brain that, hey, we might have transitivity. Then I have, he thought, so this tells me I'm deriving this, he thought that orange juice is certainly sweeter than cranberry. So I have a dotted line to show a C to A relation. This is transitivity because we have C equals A, and it is derived. That is the textbook definition of transitivity. So let's pause. Let's take questions. Once again, clearly you can see here, we don't have A to A. We don't have A to B. We don't have B to C. We have these taught, but we don't have them derived. Therefore, it's just transitivity. It cannot be stimulus equivalence, and we'll get to that in a minute, and you'll learn why stimulus equivalence is different than transitivity. Transitivity only requires this C to A relationship. All right, questions about transitivity? None. Oh, one. We don't have symmetry because these are both taught. We have A to B taught, B to A taught. Remember, when we went back to symmetry, symmetry required untaught or derived relations. So we don't have an untaught or derived relation there. Therefore, we cannot have symmetry. If it was taught, we don't have a derived relationship. That's what stimulus equivalence is all about, is derived relationships. Great. Any other questions? Cool. Let's move on. I'm hoping I did stimulus equivalence next. Let's see if I did. I did. Great. Stimulus equivalence. This gets confused with transitivity quite frequently. So let's break it down. Stimulus equivalence, and this is the textbook definition once again, the emergence of accurate responding to untrained and non-reinforced stimulus-stimulus relations following the reinforcement of responses to some stimulus-stimulus relations. That's a fancy way of saying some of it might have been taught, but you need a lot of it to be derived, right? So that's kind of what that is saying. Next, and this is probably most important, and this is how I want you to discriminate from transitivity. The definition of stimulus equivalence says it requires successful performance on 3 types of probe trials. Those 3 types of probe, those 3 types of probe trials are reflexivity, symmetry, and transitivity. So we need A to A. We need A to B taught, the reverse derived. We need A to C. We have to have those, or C to A, either one. We have to have those in order for stimulus equivalence to be met. If we don't have one of them, then we don't have stimulus equivalence. As you can see, the definition requires, it literally says that. If you go to the back of the Cooper book, I just like to use the glossary, and you look at the glossary, it says requires there. So you need reflexivity, symmetry, and transitivity. If you don't have that, you don't have stimulus equivalence. Simple as that. And that is how we can have transitivity without stimulus equivalence. That actually happens quite frequently. But we cannot have stimulus equivalence without transitivity. So this is like an SAT test, right? All right, our applied example, right? During DTT, you show your learner a yellow number 2 pencil. So clearly yellow number 2 pencil is A. They walk to their desk and grab an identical number 2 pencil. As I'm sorting through this in my mind, I say, oh, wow, look at there. We have identity matching. We have no teaching. Without drawing anything out, you should know at this point you have reflexivity. You should draw it out, though, as well. That's important. But if you can do it in your brain, that's totally fine. But we certainly have reflexivity here. You write P-E-N-C-I-L on the board. This is the written word pencil, right? So now I have a B. You teach the learner that this represents the yellow number 2 pencil. So I taught them that B, which is the written word pencil, represents A, which is the yellow pencil. So I don't have anything yet. I just have that taught. They then grab the pencil and use it to write P-E-N-C-I-L. So now, of course, without teaching, I took the pencil and I realized, hey, I write the word pencil, which represents this pencil. Now I have symmetry. I also have mutual entailment, but again, jumping ahead a slight bit. Here, we have reflexivity because we have the identity matching. And then we have symmetry because we have that, reversibility here. At this point, what I want you to know, and I don't necessarily want you to do this, but I want you to be thinking this way, is if your answers are reflexivity, symmetry, transitivity, stimulus equivalence, At this point, you should be confident enough to pick stimulus equivalence, because I have two. I can't pick reflexivity as my answer because I also have symmetry. How can I pick one over the other? If it's giving you two, then likely your answer is stimulus equivalence. Now, I have seen on mock exams and whatnot where it's like you have symmetry and reflexivity. In that case, you need to continue to sort through. But just, I don't want you to use this as a shortcut, but you can, right? I just want you to be aware of that. So they then grab the pencil, use it to write it, blah, blah, blah. When asked, where is your pencil? So now I have the spoken word pencil, so I have a C. When asked, where is your pencil? The learner grabs the yellow number 2 pencil. So now I have C to A. This is derived. So this tells me I have transitivity. I made the leap from C, which is the spoken word pencil, back up to A. As you can see here, I have reflexivity. I have symmetry. I have transitivity, which means I now have stimulus equivalence because I have these 3 successful probe trials, each of which in symmetry, reflexivity, transitivity. So that's stimulus equivalence. As you can see, transitivity did not require all of this. It just required some taught relations and then a C to A relationship. Stimulus equivalence requires a whole lot, and it requires all of it to be derived. So I hope you see that slight difference. Questions about stimulus equivalence?
I have a quick one.
Miss May, what's up?
How are you?
Good.
So where I'm getting confused is when you read it and you're supposed to be plotting it out. When you're saying during DTT you show a learner that the number 2 pencil, I was always taught that you would do A to B as the reflexivity. That's where I'm getting confused, and you're drawing it to the side.
Yeah, A to B is not reflexivity. So reflexivity is identity matching. It has to be the same sample stimulus as the comparison stimulus. If you change the version of the stimulus, that means you're changing the sample stimulus. Therefore, it cannot be reflexivity. So think of reflexivity as a reflection. It's a mirror image, right? So it has to be the same stimulus. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yes. No,
Cool.
Thank you.
Yep, you're so welcome. What else, y'all? That's a good question. Does stimulus equivalence go with stimulus generalization? Maybe, maybe not, right? It all depends. I would keep them separate for the context of this, but certainly I could use stimulus generalization to help evoke stimulus equivalence. I could also use derived relations to help evoke stimulus generalization. So certainly it's a little bit of a spider web. For the context of the test, keep them separated though, because then you're going to get in the deep dark web and you're going to confuse yourself. So good question though. Others, we're good?
Hello?
Yep. Jonathan, what's up?
Hey, so the major difference between the transitivity and the stimulus equivalence is for it to be stimulus equivalence, it needs to have all 3, correct?
1000%, sir.
Is there anything else that helped me memorize the difference between the two, or is that just the major one?
Think of stimulus equivalence as the highest, that's like the ultimate goal. We want you to be able to do all of these things with these 3 versions of a stimulus, right? We want you to know that the sun is the same when I say the word as when you look out the sky, as when you write it, as when you hear it. All of that we want you to know, right? Because in the world, this all goes with relational frame theory for context, but in the world, you have to know if someone says, hey, go grab a bottle, you have to know that that word bottle is the bottle up in the cabinet or whatever. And so that's where this stuff comes in. So think of stimulus equivalence as the ultimate goal. It's like maintenance and generalization combined, right? It is what you want to achieve. Cool?
Got it, thanks.
Cool, of course. What else, y'all? All right. So that being said, not that stimulus equivalence wasn't confusing enough. I'm going to jump into 2 kind of uber confusing things, but they don't have to be as confusing. These are a little bit further. If stimulus equivalence is chapter 19, relational frame theory is chapter 20. The next 2 things that I'm going to be going through are in the relational frame theory chapter. You do need to know them. You don't need to know that whole chapter. You essentially just need to know mutual entailment and combinatorial entailment. And so I'm hoping that I can do this justice in teaching you the difference between them. So First and foremost, what is mutual entailment? So if you look at the word mutual, if you have a mutual agreement, it means two people have agreed upon something. If I have mutual benefactors, that means two people are going to receive money when I pass away or whatever, right? And so mutual means two. That's what you want to know. It's a relationship between two things. So go to the root words, right? Always go back to the root words. It can help. An entailment just means reversibility, essentially. So this is a bidirectional. Bidirectional just means reversibility. So think about all those words. This is a bidirectional stimulus relation in which one direction is directly learned and the other is derived. Fancy, it's almost the same definition of symmetry. Symmetry is a type of mutual entailment. All symmetry is mutual entailment. Not all mutual entailment is symmetry. And I have two examples to demonstrate that. But for mutual entailment, you're looking for one direction of a relationship to be taught and the reverse to be derived. That's that reversibility. Previously, I taught this before, and I got an email from someone. In the Cooper book, it does talk about mutual entailment in terms of non-equivalence relations. It goes with equivalent relations too. What a non-equivalent relation is it's like this, the water in here is wet and this is empty, so this is dry, right? Wet, dry, that's non-equivalent. So you can use this with non-equivalent relations, just meaning opposites, or you can use it with equivalent relations. And clearly from the definition here in the Cooper book, it doesn't separate. When you go to the chapter, the example that they give, and it does fall under non-equivalence, but the example they give is a non-equivalent relation. But I want you to know it's a little bit more than that. You can use it either way. So I hope that wasn't too confusing. Here's my first example, and I'm going to show you mutual entailment when it equals symmetry. So spelled it out. I want you to see that all symmetry is mutual entailment. While working with the learner, you show them a picture of a frog. So frog would be A, and you teach them. So I have taught in my brain, I'm going to be drawing a solid line. You teach them that a frog is an amphibian, just like a salamander is an amphibian. So we have this relationship that frogs and salamanders fall within the same category. That category is amphibian. So I have A to B, they're the same thing. They're both amphibians. While walking outside, your learner spots a salamander and says, did you know that a salamander is an amphibian just like the frog over there? So we have that reverse relationship, B back to A. This is 1000% symmetry. If I had a scenario question and they said, is this symmetry or mutual entailment? I couldn't answer. It's both. It meets the definition. So likely it's a bad question or there's a different answer. So that's the first thing you need to be thinking when you see that. But certainly we have mutual entailment here. Certainly we have symmetry here. Now I want you to see an example when mutual entailment is not symmetry. So this is our example when it is not symmetry. Trent enjoys trains. You decided it is a great idea to run you decide it is a great idea to program trains as a way to teach the learner vehicles. So here we're obviously doing some categorization. You show them a train, so this is A, and teach them that this is a vehicle, just like a school bus. So I've taught you that a train is the same as a school bus. This is A to B, it's taught, so we don't have any reversibility. You also show them a fire truck. So now I'm jumping over to C, right? You show them a fire truck and teach them that this vehicle, that this is a vehicle like a train. So we have C to A taught. That's why my line here, C to A is taught, because it says teach them. They see a train, which is A, and say that is a vehicle just like a fire truck. So we were able to derive that a train and a fire truck are the same. We were taught one direction, we derived the reverse. That is transitivity, but in this case, it's also mutual entailment. This is why I say we can certainly have mutual entailment without having symmetry. I don't have symmetry here, but I do have two taught derived relations and a reverse, which tells me I have symmetry, or sorry, I have transitivity. So this is how that can be both and separated. So did I make that clear enough? Does that make sense? Are you like, what is Miko talking about? Get Kevin in here. What are you thinking? How are you feeling? Are we doing good? Sweet. Question. Yeah.
So this is my first time hearing mutual entailment. As far as the text, I need to just focus on reflexivity, symmetry, transitivity, and stimulus equivalence, correct?
No, yes and no. Hopefully, if you get a question on on these things on your test, it'll be those. But this is a critical part of it, and it does fall within stimulus equivalence. So you do need to know mutual entailment, and I would say that you also need to know you also need to know combinatorial entailment, which I'm about to go over next.
Got it.
Yep. Yes, sir. And those are in chapter 20. So they're in the it's the relational frame theory chapter. So great. Other questions about mutual entailment before we get into combinatorial? All right, let's do it. Combinatorial, again, root words, combo, entailment. Combo means two. If I go and get a combo, it's going to come with multiple things. That's what you're looking for. We're looking for two mutual entailments. That's it, with a common third. The definition is a relation involving two stimuli that both participate in mutual entailment with a common third stimulus. So it's just combo, it's just two mutual entailments, and it needs a common third stimulus. What this looks like is as follows. Hey, buddy, stop. Come here. Stop. Sorry, guys. You are an avid collector of all things shiny. This obsession began when you were but a wee little lad. Your grandfather showed you a disco ball. So we have disco ball, which is A, and taught you that it shines bright like a diamond, as Katy Perry would say. So is that Katy Perry? I hope so. So we have A to B taught so far, right? So we have this disco ball to diamond. From that day, you knew, so this is derived, that diamonds were just as shiny as disco balls. So I have B back to A. Oh gosh, it's Rihanna. I'm so sorry, y'all. Cool. So we have A to B, and then we have that reverse. So as of right, and I have my triangle the wrong way, so disregard. But we have this symmetry here, right? Then it says a few years later, your father took you to the Bean in Chicago. If y'all haven't been, it's pretty cool. And said it's just as shiny as that disco ball your grandfather loved. So we were taught that the Bean, which is C, is just as shiny as a disco ball. So we have that C to A relationship that's taught. From there, while looking at a memory book, you see a disco ball, and this should say think, so little typo. Think to yourself, yep, that's as shiny as the Bean. So you have the reverse relationship. So here I have a common third stimulus, which is A. I have mutual entailment here, ME here, and I have mutual entailment over here. Therefore, I have mutual entailment on both sides, and I have a common third stimulus. This gives us combo, two, combinatorial entailment. So that's all it is. It's not super difficult. It's certainly not easy, and it's one of the harder things on the test. But it's not like abnormally. It is abnormally hard. It's just not unsolvable, I guess, is what I want to say. So that's that. That's combinatorial entailment. What questions do y'all have? Angelica, what's cracking?
Hey, so just for the difference is the mutual entailment is just the one direction, which is this one is two directions, correct?
You got it. Mutual entailment is only one direction, which is here. So we only have one side, whereas combinatorial entailment requires both sides.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, cool. And there's a question in the chat. It says, is mutual entailment the same as symmetry? Yes and no. I don't want you to think of them as AKAs because they're not. Symmetry is mutual entailment, but in this example, we don't have symmetry, but we have mutual entailment. So this tells me they're not true AKAs. They're not the same. I can have mutual entailment without symmetry. I can't have symmetry without mutual entailment though. Took me a minute to think about what I was trying to say there. So, Kyle, come on, dude. Seriously. All right. Next question. How do we feel? Was this helpful? Do you feel a little bit better? Maybe, hopefully, I hope so. Hopefully I didn't just waste 40 minutes of your lives. We don't have a mini mock on this yet. We've been kicking around the idea of doing one on it. So maybe I will have at least 10-ish questions for you all next Tuesday. This was just part one. As you can tell, it took 40 minutes. So this is one of the longer things we've taught. Next week, we will go through about 10 questions on it. I will be uploading the recording to this tomorrow, so you'll have access to it. But Break Down the Beast is in Eastern time. It's at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So it starts at 11 Eastern, which is 8 Pacific, which is 9 Mountain, which is 10 Central, which is 11 Eastern Standard Time. So 11 Eastern Standard Time. Cool. Other questions? Correct. It's 4 hours long. So 4 hours long. Miss Angelica.
Hi, I have 2 questions that's not related to this topic in particular.
Yep.
But is fixed interval limited hold? Or
Does a limited hold go with a fixed interval, or is a fixed interval a limited hold? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay, yes. So limited hold goes with interval schedules. So in an interval schedule, time goes and then you have to distribute a response after the time, right? That's an interval. If we have a limited hold, you have to exhibit the response within so much time of the end of the interval. So if I do like fixed interval 1 minute with a 1 minute limited hold, you have to wait 1 minute and then you have 1 minute to engage in the behavior. If you engage in it after the limited hold minute, you don't get reinforcement, right?
Okay, perfect. And my next question is alternative treatment. So is there a lag schedule that goes with alternative treatment?
Yeah, I don't know if it goes with alternative treatment necessarily, but there is a lag schedule of reinforcement. What a lag schedule of reinforcement is it's when you require a new response. So I used to work with this little girl and she's extremely bright. She memorized things quickly. And so we taught emotions, and when we were teaching receptive identification, we would also run an intraverbal where we would say, what makes you happy? And she would answer the same thing, like playing with toys. So we entered a lag 1. So cool. One time you can say playing with toys, then you got to say something new. So playing with toys makes me happy. Hugging my mom makes me happy. So that's a lag 1. A lag 2 would be playing with toys makes me happy. My mom makes me happy. Eating food makes me happy. So 2 new responses. Lag 3, so on and so forth. But yes, that's a thing. And it's super useful. I think that out of all of the schedules of reinforcement outside of the simple ones, I use lag schedules much more than I use compound schedules, 100% more.
Okay, perfect. One last question. If we figure out, okay, let me rephrase my sentence.
Yep.
So when we're trying to figure out the function of the behavior and we're trying to look at all the conditions, if it's an automatic, is that compared to is it AKA sensory?
Yeah, so automatic and sensory are the same thing, exactly. And that just tells me that it's occurring across conditions. So it's happening in multiple different conditions, then I know that it is likely an automatic function.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Cool. You're so welcome. Anything else? Great. So Thursday, we're continuing on in section C. I don't remember where we left off, but I will on Thursday. I haven't decided what we're doing yet tomorrow for the free Zoom. So if you have something you want to go through, just DM me on Instagram. Someone asked for partial, whole, and momentary time sampling. 30 minutes is not enough to do that. So I'm gonna have to do it as a mini lesson for the All You Need course. But if there's a specific thing you want to go through that I can do in 30 minutes tomorrow, feel free to drop me a line on Instagram. I will see y'all on Thursday. And then again, next Tuesday, we're going to be going through examples of this, questions. I will have the triangles written out to make it a little bit easier. But please rewatch this and please go to that chapter in the Cooper book. It's building good study practice. So make sure you check that chapter out. It's chapter 19 and read about half of chapter 20. That's the relational frame theory chapter. You can start where it starts getting into the different frames is what it'll talk about. You can stop there, but awesome. Well, I hope this is helpful. Like I said, we're here trying to help y'all. So if there's specific things you want to go through on these mini lessons, please let me know. Cool. Take it easy. Have a good week. Happy Tuesday.